Hey everybody, good Thursday morning. It's Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich. Well, the day is here and we're tracking the event as it unfolds. I'm not going to make a ton of changes, but I will tell you some of the updates I see this morning. And at this point, it's all about just nowcasting. And what I mean is we're kind of seeing what happens unfolds as things develop. There's not a lot of really long range analysis, but I'll show you some of the things to watch out for today that could lead to more snow, less snow, and things that are really kind of more important than sometimes even watching the radar. So let's first of all start with this map, because I woke up this morning and I looked at this and I said, okay, there's no upgrade to a winter storm warning, but for the first time in a long time, look at this map carefully. Every single county in North Carolina is under a winter weather advisory or winter storm warning. That doesn't happen very often. So this is a pretty unique event from a scope standpoint that it's affecting such a large area. So pretty impressive to see that. Here's the radar and satellite together. So I'm going to show you some simple things. A lot of folks will be staring at the radar all day looking to see where the rain snow line is, but that's important. Trust me, it is. But one of the things I look at is surface observations to see what's actually falling. We do have snow falling in Tennessee, the mountains. We are getting some sleet reports, and we had a burst of sleet come through the Matthews area, this morning, and some sleet in the sandhills. But the heavier precip is back to the west. The one thing that's impressive about this radar image is just how much moisture there is back here. I don't think we're going to be lacking for moisture. I think the real dilemma is how much of the warm nose, which is this warm layer aloft, is coming in, and how much cold air. And this brings me to the other thing to really watch that I really look at in this situation. Two things, the temperature and the dew point. The dew point is really key in this. So cold air is trying to move in from the north and the east. You notice how cold it is in parts of Virginia and northern North Carolina near the border. It's in the upper 30s. So evaporative cooling is going to drive a lot of this process today, or dynamic cooling, which is basically air that's dry where moisture falls into it and evaporates, and the atmosphere actually generates its own cold air. So in this case, I'm looking at the dew point temperatures, and this is pretty impressive. Now, it might be hard to see here because these numbers are a little bit smaller, but anything below the freezing point, which is 32, is significant, because we've got dew points here in the teens and low 20s, and that dry air is continuing to push in at the same time this moisture is moving in. Now, this dry air is at the lowest levels. This warm, moist air is in the mid and upper levels. So what's happening is the cold air is trying to drop down to the surface, but there's warm air at the surface. So what happens is that dry air evaporates some of the moisture. Now, it doesn't evaporate all of it, but when it evaporates it, it causes cooling. You're basically giving up the heat in the air to cause it to cool. So that heat has to go to evaporation. And because that heat's going to evaporating the moisture, it starts dropping the temperature of the air. It's just like I tell people, it's a really cool thermodynamic process. If you think about how you heat up water, you add heat to it. The way you cool water is you remove heat from it. And you can remove heat by evaporation. So the evaporating process actually causes the air to cool. The other thing is to watch the winds. Notice they're all out of the northeast. So as long as this northeast flow is continuing and the air is dry, that's going to be really key as we go into the afternoon hours to see this snow kind of develop. So let's look at the guidance here. I'm gonna kind of load this guidance up. I'm gonna turn everything off just for a second, just so we can see clearly. I'm gonna throw up the model data, and I'm gonna look at really short range modeling in this case, because to me that's what we need to do. So we'll look at the really short range stuff here. And we'll start going into the morning hours and kind of time this out as far as when this is going to change over. So I'm going to stop this at about, we'll stop this at about 1 o'clock this afternoon. So one thing I'm noticing today, it might take a little longer for the rain to change over to snow. I think it's going to be more in that 3 to 4 o'clock time frame. And again, this is about 4 to 5 o'clock. You can see that the rain snow line somewhere in here from Raleigh to Charlotte. Snow falling up in here. So I think there's going to be a delay in the changeover by a couple hours. That's one thing I'm noticing immediately this morning as I look over some of the data. So by 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, we probably see a pretty big changeover. Now, that's a good thing and a bad thing. It gives you more time to kind of plan, and kids can get home and roads will be fine. But because the changeover is happening closer to sunset, probably means it's probably got a better chance to stick initially, because it's definitely going to be colder. This is heading towards 7 o'clock tonight, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. So this could linger longer into the evening. So I think two things. It's going to be a little slower to change over, but that means it's probably going to snow a little bit more after sunset, which means it might actually drive up the snowfall. So that's something that kind of weighs in the camp of maybe slightly more snow because the snow is delayed a little bit. It actually could fall more in the cooler part of the day and night where it accumulates. And even at 2 a.m., we've got some snow showers in the area. So it really doesn't move out until the late night hours. And then tomorrow morning, you even got some crazy little snow bands showing up here. So that's an interesting thing to watch. But then I look at the really short range rapid refresh model, which I'll pull up here shortly. And it's a little bit different. It's got the onset taking longer than even the NAM. It takes until mid-afternoon, and in some cases doesn't change it over completely. Now, one of the things I worry about the short range model here is it's struggling with the temperature profile because it's got sleet over here, some pockets of snow and all rain. It seems to be struggling with the temperature profile, but it's something to keep an eye on that we might have a real struggle to change over in parts of the area. I think I'm leaning more on the NAM for not the amounts, but more the temperature profile, because that's one thing this model does a much better job with. And if I look at that temperature profile, I showed you this yesterday. It's kind of a cool thing to look at. Let me pull this up here. You can see I stopped this at about 10 a.m. And you can see this is the freezing line. And up here around 7,000 feet, it's really close to the freezing mark. And this happens more so at around 3 to 4 p.m. that we see the changeover. So even in the ensemble mean, the slower arrival of the snow is showing up. So I feel fairly confident in that. But once it changes over here, it looks like it stays snow well into the evening and maybe all the way until 2 or 3 in the morning. So that's a little bit different than last night even. And I'll bring this over, that we're seeing the snow change over later, and the snow amounts are still around 2 inches in Charlotte, which still seems a little high to me, but I think that makes sense in the chamber. Now, as far as what I'm going to do with my snowfall maps, I'm not going to do a lot of change. The only thing that I really did is, I think the one area that I'm a little concerned about is these areas south of Charlotte, where I don't think we're going to see this stay as snow long enough. So these areas could really be more a trace to almost nothing, and the higher amounts here and here. So again, it seems like the North Carolina border, there's just something about that where near the border in south looks like a lower chance. But I'm going to stick with these right now. And again, I would caution you to look at the bust potential up here as well as the boom potential, because that's, if we see the changeover happen quicker, we could see more snow. If it goes longer into the evening, then we could see things stay snow longer, and that means potentially for more of a boom on this. So those are things I'm keeping an eye on this morning. And again, it's really, this is all model data, but honestly, the thing you got to watch is just what's actually happening. And the one thing that, the guidance isn't doing a real good job on, it didn't show this much moisture to our west. That's a lot of moisture. In some cases, it's a little more than the guidance is showing. The real dilemma is the cold air, I think. So the track looks pretty solid. The amount of moisture looks good. The question is how much of this dry air can continue to vect in here. The one thing about having more moisture, if you keep throwing it into this dry air, that evaporative cooling process is certainly going to keep going. So the fact that we've got moisture falling now, it's 45 degrees. The dew point in Charlotte is 28. That's below the freezing mark. We've got room to cool this air down a lot quicker. And the other thing that'll be cool to watch is what elevation we see snow. Could we see snow in uptown buildings but not at the ground? That would tell me that the profile's changing, that the cold air is getting closer to the surface. So I guess the only update really is that I think the snow changeover is going to be a little later. It's probably going to happen mid-afternoon, maybe late afternoon, as opposed to early afternoon or midday. Other than that, I'm not going to make a lot of changes on the snowfall forecast. Of course, I'm going in early. I will be at work around noon to 12:30. We'll be doing cut-ins all day, and I'll try to track this thing as we go. The good news is I don't think roads will be an issue at all during the daylight hours today. So if that's any solace to you, I think roads will be fine during